Good morning. On behalf of Secretary of the Interior Ken Salazar and National Park Service Director Jonathan Jarvis, let me welcome you to the Catoctin Mountains that we refer to sometimes as Maryland's Front Range, and also to Frederick County, home of the county that contains the most units of the National Park System of any in the nation. And finally, soon to be home to the G8 Economic Summit, my current part-time job. It was author Wendell Berry who said, "If you don't know where you don't know who you are." Where you stand at any moment has meaning above and below you for the land, air, and water that surround you, but also inside you for the inspiration, reflection, and spirituality that this planet provides to human beings. I'd like to give you a quick idea this morning of where environmental education has come from, also known as nature interpretation or conservation education, depending upon where in the country you might be at any point in time. This will be somewhat of a stroll down memory lane, but it will be done at a pretty quick trot. Now, in earlier agricultural eras, the understanding of place, or environmental education, was largely taught by families on farm fields, in woodlots, and at the swimming hole, because that's where we lived, and nature was with us virtually every day. From 1840 to 1950, U.S. agricultural productivity doubled due to revolutions in irrigation, pesticides, and farm equipment. The Industrial Revolution bought our family farms and started us on a migration to cities and to a new era of urban and suburban existence. Displaced humans began to long for their lost green space, and the transcendental writers like Emerson and Thoreau captured those yearnings in their writing. In 1854, Central Park in New York City was created as the first public park in America so that American industrial workers, now living in cities, would have a place to rest on their one day off a week. Despite being engaged in a bloody Civil War, Abraham Lincoln took the time in 1864 to create Yosemite as the first state park in the United States from what had been a mining operation. And in 1872, Yellowstone became the first national park, a pleasuring ground, as Teddy Roosevelt declared, for all the people. In 1910, urban population surpassed farm labor, and New York City's population doubled every 10 years due to worker immigration. Before, we had learned about nature on the farm from our families, and now we would learn about nature from naturalist and preserved natural areas called parks. One of the principal architects of the development of interpretation and environmental education in the national parks was Harold C. Bryant. After attempts at Lake Tahoe and Glacier National Park, Bryant, in the summer of 1919, with the nonprofit California Nature Study League, developed 4 interpretive lectures in Yosemite Valley. None other than the founder of the National Park System, Stephen Mather, asked Bryant for a similar program at Yosemite, by now a national park, in the summer of 1920. The political reality that confronted Mather in establishing and marketing the young and largely Western national park system demanded that he generate enthusiasm for the parks among visitors from the eastern U.S. Promoting their educational potential was a key ingredient in this strategy. The Yosemite National Guide Service, which Bryant launched in 1920, was the first interpretive program ever sanctioned by the National Park Service and was done through a cooperative arrangement with the California Fish and Game Commission. Bryant spent his next 10 summers in this work and served without cost to the federal government. In 1925, he was named the first director of the Yosemite School of Field History and trained literally thousands of the first generations of park naturalists that are out there. He had 4 guiding principles. First, simple, understandable interpretation of the major features of a park to the public through field trips, outdoor lectures, and exhibits. Second, emphasis upon leading the visitor to study the real thing. Third, utilization of highly trained personnel to deliver those programs who had field experience and could also interpret to the public the laws of the universe as exemplified in the parks. Sometimes not the easiest of tasks. And finally, he wanted to develop a research program to supply dependable facts suitable for use, because as we all know, there are many legends in the countryside. Bryant then joined the National Park Service and went on to serve 24 years as the superintendent at Grand Canyon National Park. Another early feature of nature interpretation was the involvement of women as park naturalists. One of the first of these rangerettes, as they were called by their male counterparts, was Claire Marie Hodges, who literally served as a ranger in order to fill a vacancy by men who had left to serve in World War I. At a time when women did not have the right to vote, Hodges, a local school teacher, served as a ranger in Yosemite National Park beginning in May 1918 and was soon joined by Enid Michael in the 1920s. Many women naturalists, including Isabel Bassett, Mary Rolfe, and Herma Bagley, served as ranger naturalists in Yellowstone in the 1920s and 30s until the Depression led to the dismissal of many women who were serving in those capacities so that men could care for their families. Just as the Depression in World War II took much of the interpretive life out of our parks, the post-war economic boom rekindled a demand for recreation that resonated here in Frederick County and literally throughout the nation. Frederick County began a residential environmental education camp at Camp Greentop in Catoctin Mountain Park that was followed by Washington County opening up a similar camp in Camp Misty Mount, and they would be joined by the District of Columbia Public Schools in the late 1960s at Camp Round Meadow. The leaders of this movement. In 1957, Freeman Tilden, who we regard as the father of modern interpretation, wrote his vaunted Interpreting Our Heritage. His principles are still guiding us today. First, interpretation is revelation based upon information. Second, the chief aim of interpretation is not instruction. It's not to teach, but it is to inspire more learning. And third, and this was an extremely radical idea in its time, that children's interpretation is not a dumbed down or watered down adult version, but requires a fundamentally different approach. We're still arguing that one out a little bit today. Steve Van Mater, author of the environmental education primer Acclimatizing, took us a step farther in the 1970s and urged educators and children alike to get off the boardwalk. Not the one in Ocean City, but all the ones in parks, so that he was urging people to go beyond the rope and experience the primordial ooze of the place. It was a golden age of environmental education that would continue through the 1990s when fiscal constraints and cultural shifts snapped us back to reality. Sadly, there has been no residential environmental education program like the Frederick County program in Catoctin Mountain Park since 2007. The District of Columbia Public Schools was the last to leave. At a time when we should be bringing children to the outdoors for health and social reasons like fighting childhood obesity and teaching science and environmental leadership, we seem to be pushing them away for technological and legal reasons. The burden of legal liability in overnight programs seems never to lighten. Scandals in our most respected social, religious, and academic institutions have, for many adults, dampened their enthusiasm to work with youth and certainly drawn some bright new white lines of responsible behavior for our children and in their engagement with adults. We must set the highest standards of care possible for our children and understand the full consequences, ethical, professional, legal, and financial, that follow any deviation. Transportation has also risen as an issue that has made it harder for all institutions to bring children, especially poor and the most underserved, outdoors. And rising energy costs will only make this more difficult. While we continue to grapple with the social and environmental impacts of the Industrial Revolution, we must now also embrace the emerging information revolution and its technology, even as we struggle to understand it. Just as my generation was fascinated by television and hardwired telephones, the current generation is most comfortable in the social media of Facebook, text messaging, and all things digital. It is the language of the next generation, and if we want to communicate resource stewardship issues to them, it must be in the medium of their choice and not ours. None of us alone will bring the children of this nation back to nature, nor should we try. The only path to the successful return of overnight environmental education for children requires that government at all levels, our partners in the nonprofit and private sectors, and certainly every parent will need to help in building this trail to true self-replicating social change. John Muir said, "As long as I live, I'll hear the waterfalls and birds and wind sing. I'll interpret the rocks, learn the language of the flood, storm, and the avalanche. I'll acquaint myself with the glaciers and the wild gardens and get as near the heart of the world as I can." And that is our challenge today and for future generations. It is to find a way to get our children to the heart of the world. Thank you to Catoctin Forest Alliance for convening us today, and welcome to the Catoctin Mountains.